On April 4th, 1943, somewhere over the Sahara Desert, a United States Army Air Forces B-24 Liberator bomber silently crossed its own home base and kept flying. 9 men were aboard, and for 16 years, the U.S. military had no idea where any of them were. When the truth finally surfaced, what investigators found 440 miles deep in the Libyan desert didn't just solve a mystery, it reopened one. This is the story of the Lady Be Good. It's the story of a bomber that vanished on its very first combat mission, only to be found decades later, perfectly preserved, its guns still loaded, its radio still functional, its crew nowhere in sight. And there are parts of this story that still don't add up. To understand what happened, you need to go back to the spring of 1943, when the Allies were fighting to gain air superiority across North Africa. The 376th Bombardment Group was stationed at Soluch Airfield near Benghazi, Libya. These were young men, most of them barely in their 20s, flying some of the most dangerous missions of the war. On April 4th, the Lady Be Good was sent out on a bombing run over Naples, Italy. It would be her first and last mission. It was late afternoon when the formation took off. Heavy winds disrupted the group almost immediately. The Lady Be Good, piloted by First Lieutenant William Hatton, became separated from the others. She pushed on toward Naples alone, but cloud cover and deteriorating weather forced her to turn back before reaching the target. The real problem began on the return flight. As night fell over the Mediterranean, the crew, relying on radio navigation, requested position bearings from their base. The base received the signals, but operators, suspecting an enemy deception, did not respond. And this is where everything went wrong. Without a confirmed position fix, the crew trusted their onboard instruments that were almost certainly thrown off by a powerful tailwind that had accelerated their return without their knowledge. They believed they were still over the Mediterranean, when in reality, they had already crossed the Libyan coastline and were flying deep into the Sahara. When their fuel gauges hit 0, Hatton gave the order to bail out. 8 of the 9 men survived the jump. Bombardier John Waravka's parachute failed. He was killed on impact. The surviving 8 landed in one of the most hostile environments on Earth, the Libyan Sand Sea, with almost no water, no rescue signal equipment, and no way of knowing that their airfield was nearly 450 miles behind them. What's remarkable about this is that their diaries were later recovered. Co-pilot Robert Toner's final entry, dated April 12th, simply read, "No help yet. Very weak." They had walked approximately 85 miles north before the desert took them, one by one. The wreck was discovered in February 1959 by a British oil exploration team. The aircraft was eerily intact, preserved by the extreme aridity of the Sahara. Thermos flasks still held drinkable water. The radio worked. Machine guns were still armed. Over the following year, search teams recovered the remains and personal journals of the crew. The remains of one crew member, Staff Sergeant Vernon Moore, were never found. And here's what still doesn't make sense. The base received the crew's distress transmissions, a simple response, a single bearing, could have guided them home. The decision not to reply, made in seconds, condemned 9 men to walk to their deaths in one of the world's largest deserts. The Lady Be Good tells us something uncomfortable about military systems, that protocol, miscommunication, and silence can be just as lethal as enemy fire. The plane sits in the Libyan desert to this day, a monument no one intended to build.
Takeaways. 1. Navigation failure plus communication silence equals catastrophic loss, even without enemy action. 2. Extreme environments preserve evidence. The Sahara kept the truth intact for 16 years. 3. Human error inside command structures can be deadlier than the mission itself. Subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.